So chicken's not evil. Chicken is not an allergen. What kind of chicken are you feeding? How often are you feeding it? What else are you feeding? That's the problem. Welcome to the Crunchy Carnivore Podcast. I am Melissa Weidenhammer, and I'm here with Dr. Jessica Levy and my fellow NR Breeder, Nicole Nelson. And we're super excited about today because we are going to go over your guys' questions. We had a lot of people funnel questions in on Instagram about what they wanted to know. And we're going to dig into a few different things.
All right, so I just dive into the questions that I got.
Take it away.
Yeah, so what I had done was I put out a video just asking what you would like to ask this group. My job is to bring these questions. So the first question, I actually didn't really know what this was, so I'll just ask. I guess there's AAFCO standards and NRC guidelines, and I think this revolves around diet. I think it was what's the difference, or who should we be listening to?
Go ahead.
Yeah, and so these are organizations that it's hard to understand kind of what they do and who they're affiliated with. So NRC is the National Research Council, and they're the ones who did the original studies in 1985 and then subsequently revisited the studies in, I think, 2006, but I don't think anything was published about the revisions, where they looked at the vitamin mineral requirements of dogs and cats. And these were the studies where they used very small numbers of animals. So they had 8 puppies, 8 lactating moms, and 8 adult dogs in each group. And then, they basically did food experiments with them to find out, just like with humans. So you think about with humans, stuff will say this meets the RDA, or this is 50% of your RDA of vitamin C or whatever. What does that mean? The recommended daily amount or the required daily amount? And so that's basically for certain vitamins and minerals that cause specific syndromes when we don't get them in our diet. And so they've kind of figured out how much do you need in your diet. But for humans, the RDA is basically how much vitamin C do you need not to get scurvy, not how much vitamin C do you need to be radiantly healthy. But that's what those standards are based on. When you look at your breakfast cereal and it says enriched, that means that they've added some of those vitamins back in. So the NRC was the one who did that kind of research and then published the original information, like I said, in 1985. AAFCO is the American Association of Feed Control Officials. And so AAFCO is not part of the government. It's not a governmental agency. It's an independent organization that is in charge of what goes into animal feed. So we're talking about chickens, turkeys, ducks, cows, sheep, pigs, etc., and dogs and cats. And so basically AAFCO comes out with their recommendations, which people who manufacture pet food can choose to meet their recommendations or not. AAFCO are the ones who they define what the ingredients on a bag of dog food mean. So basically, if the dog food says chicken, AAFCO might have set a rule, something like chicken might mean bones and organs and not actually muscle meat. But as far as the pet food manufacturer is concerned, they can put bones and organs into the food and on the label call it chicken. But because AAFCO is this independent group, they do have some sway because they work with all the large pet food companies. And that's basically why a client brought this up to me yesterday. They noticed that the raw food that they were buying said on it, not a complete diet. And this is because that food is not meeting AAFCO standards. And so you could say, well, oh my gosh, is this a bad thing? This food is not meeting a standard.
Right.
And I know that here at our local university vet school, their nutritionist on staff has done several TV spots, and every time you see her talking to a client, this is what she says, like, make sure that on the bag of food, it says that it meets AAFCO standards or has undergone an AAFCO feeding trial.
Mm-hmm.
So the AAFCO feeding trials is something like they take very small numbers of dogs. The feeding trial lasts 6 months. The dogs cannot lose more than a certain percentage of their body weight. Only a certain number of the dogs can die during the trial. Certain blood parameters have to stay within certain ranges in order for the dogs to complete the trial successfully. And then if the X number of dogs survive the feeding trial, then the manufacturer can put on the bag, safe for all life stages or something like that. And then there are other rules, which are kind of like the rules for drugs, where if they then manufacture another food that is a lot like the first food, they can say it is similar enough that they can say that this food meets the requirements of an AAFCO feeding trial, even if it has not actually undergone an AAFCO feeding trial. So this is basically like the regulations around pet food. And then last year, the year before, I think, the FDA announced that they were separating themselves from AAFCO, although they would still accept and solicit input from AAFCO. But I think the two organizations had been much more closely tied, and now the FDA is distancing itself from AAFCO a little bit. And so they're kind of setting the rules, and then the pet food manufacturers, like I said, they can choose to follow the AAFCO recommendations or not. Because Big Kibble, the large pet food manufacturers, because kibble essentially is so cooked, processed, devitalized, you name it, so they have to add vitamins and minerals back to it so that it actually has some nutritional content. And so then for certain companies, like Stella & Chewy's does this. Stella & Chewy's adds all the synthetic vitamins and minerals to their raw food in order to meet AAFCO standards, because it's kind of like you want to play on the big stage.
Right.
You want to make a product that can be distributed nationally. You know, you're looking for that sort of approval. It's like the real seal for pet food. But not everybody does that. And so if you find a raw food that says on it something like not a complete diet, or, whatever, doesn't meet AAFCO standards, or supplemental feeding only, because they can't say that it's a complete diet, because AAFCO's like, no, we'll come after you.
So,
so then we actually want the ones that don't meet AAFCO standards, because we are going to add our own sources of vitamins and minerals.
Maybe agree with the bare minimum AAFCO standards, or
correct. And also all the vitamin mineral mixes, they're all synthetic.
Right.
Okay.
Each pet food company, they're not manufacturing their own vitamin mineral mixes. These things essentially come from other countries. There are dealers who deal in vitamin mineral mixes for pet food. And so there's all sorts of issues there, right? Just like, we were talking pre-show, and just like you said, you can have, when you have the nutritional analysis, the breakdown of the food, how much protein, how much fiber, how much fat. The protein could be from any source. Like essentially, your shoe probably contains some protein, some fiber, some fat, and yet it's not digestible. But that's not the criteria. And so that's where I think AAFCO standards can kind of bite us in the butt. In recent years, there has been a huge problem with copper liver poisoning in dogs from pet food. And the reason this is happening is because AAFCO in the past few years changed the source of copper in dog food from whatever they were using before to something else. And they set a minimum required level, but they did not set a maximum. So many dogs are getting too much liver in their food and getting poisoned.
Too much copper.
Too much copper.
Yep.
Thank you.
I was like, don't say that.
Not too much liver. Oh no.
No, there's not too much liver.
Yeah.
Ever.
Okay. Too much copper.
Too much copper
in their food. And then that's like nuking their liver. So when I go to conferences now, every nutrition lecture, they're discussing how are we going to treat this new problem of dogs getting copper hepatopathy from their food. And I'm the only one sitting in the audience like, why are we feeding them this stuff if it's poisoning their livers?
But if it's AAFCO approved, then everyone's like, well, that couldn't be the problem.
Then it's good.
Then it's good.
What confuses me, so when we went through all of our education on nutrition, they talked about how, these AAFCO standards and all this different stuff, like the sources of it clearly are synthetic. I think they're synthetic. And synthetic is going to read differently nutritionally in the dog's body, especially than an organic source like
Correct.
liver, right? And so what just kind of, I just can't wrap my brain around it is that there's all these raw pet food companies out now that are coming out with their food saying complete and balanced and it's AAFCO approved or meets AAFCO standards. Meets AAFCO standards. And when I was reading it and I was like, in order for a dog to actually get enough out of a synthetic, vitamin or mineral, you have to give way more of it, right?
Potentially.
And so
or
then like
form.
you have the synthetic form, which you're giving then a lot of because it's synthetic, because you're trying to give the dog a benefit. Then you switch over to real food, raw food, and you meet those standards. Are you not going to do damage at that point? Because it's different. Like the sourcing is different. The way it's bioavailable is different.
Right. But when you see with the vitamins and minerals, so if for copper, AAFCO is setting a minimum but not a maximum, that means that each different food could have a different amount of copper in it.
Sure. It's the minimums. I see what you're saying.
Right. And so it's like, it's going to be, and sometimes they may set a minimum and a maximum, but you could be anywhere within that range.
And so then to that end, again, raw pet food companies saying we meet AAFCO standards doesn't really mean anything. Right?
Does it mean they're using synthetics then, or not necessarily?
Not necessarily.
They just need this range
or well, maybe they would need to.
Or what they could do is like basically at the end of the process, they analyze the food and they can prove it has this much copper, this much iron, this much vitamin A. It could be something like that.
I think what drives me nuts about the AAFCO stuff, and I was telling you guys this before we started talking, it makes me very upset. But I think what makes me so upset about it is because it gives people this false sense of confidence in what they're feeding. There's really not a good genetic backing
Correct.
from the species to say that these minimums are accurate. And so if we go back to like the foundation in AAFCO in and of itself, or the NRC, which is for where this all came from, because I believe the AAFCO did originally get their guidelines from them, but then they've changed them and you said they're really not related anymore. So the original question I think that was posed on social media was, which one's better? Which one should we be following? My answer is neither.
Correct.
My answer is neither, because they're not right.
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem. And that's what people, I hope, will start learning about this. And this is in our raw feeding guide that we made, where it literally breaks down the basic nutritional components of an ancestral diet compared to what AAFCO says. And they're completely wrong. Completely wrong. And so I hope that people can maybe look at take a step back, zoom out a little bit, look at biologically, what are they supposed to eat? We know that by what we see in, because they're domesticated wolves. We've talked about this 100 times. We've made it way overly complicated. We have allowed these big organizations to tell us what animals are supposed to eat. When it's actually completely false.
You know what this kind of reminds me of, just like from my perspective, is the food pyramid, where you're like, okay, if I'm following this food pyramid, I'm eating right. Like, what could possibly be wrong? This triangle is what I should eat. But then I think you realize, wait a minute, this food pyramid isn't what I should be eating.
Right, it's upside down.
And so I think it's just that thought process where like you feel safe if it's AAFCO approved or whatever. Just like, well, should you? Because that's like the food pyramid, and right.
But
so I kind of like that.
But I wonder too, like with the food pyramid for humans, does that give you the impression that you should eat everything on the pyramid every day? Because that's kind of what's happening with dogs, right? So we have this massive pet food industry, and they're the ones who basically caution us like, every time you put that dish down, it should contain a balanced meal.
Right.
And so they are kind of like, in some ways, the pet food police.
Mm-hmm.
But like I was saying earlier, if you, sit down with your family around the dinner table, like I'm waiting for somebody from AAFCO to show up and inspect our plates and kind of look in the pots and pans and say, I don't like the looks of that. Or like you said, I see 3 parts of the pyramid, but I think you're missing some things.
Right.
So,
And then everyone has to panic because
Right.
your meal
it's not balanced.
It's not. Yeah.
Yes.
This is kind of a question then too. Speaking of not balanced, so on like the raw food or the packaging that says not a complete meal, do they have to put that? If they're not AAFCO approved, do they have to put not a complete meal? Are they just trying to cover their butts? Like, why are they even, like, why are you saying
Because they're not adding synthetic vitamins and minerals.
Okay, so when we see that, I'd be like, oh no, this isn't a complete meal.
Correct.
It would be a negative thing for me to see.
Correct, which is what they're trying to do. Because what they want you to do is say, well, I'm going to go back to feeding this food in a bag because it says on it that it is complete and balanced.
And it's
But the raw food
And it's
company
AAFCO approved.
who puts that, they wouldn't want you to think that. Like if I'm labeling my raw food, I wouldn't want to put, this is not a complete diet.
Oh, of course.
Why are they have to put that?
Yes, they're being punished.
Okay.
My goodness. Stop with the independent thought already.
Okay. All right. So I think like we kind of covered this. So like when you read that, don't panic. It just means they're not approved by something that actually sounds like we don't agree with anyway.
Right, because it's not in your pet's benefit. And again, like we forget that dog and cat food is part of what AAFCO does.
Right.
But AAFCO is in charge of like all animal feed.
And it's feed. That's the other thing. It's feed. Right.
And so if you think too, like think about the breakfast cereal company that's like, well, here, this breakfast cereal will get you your RDA of vitamin C. And you say, okay, but like everybody around me is getting the flu and I'm going through menopause and I don't feel so great. It's like, well, too bad.
You guys should all eat this cereal.
Exactly.
And that makes no sense.
So as pet owners, we don't just want our pets to survive. We want them to thrive. We want them to be amazingly healthy. So I think too, like one of the things that I learned just recently, I was rereading Wendell Bellfield's book, How to Have a Healthier Dog. And one of the things he talked about was that hardly anybody thinks about adding vitamin C to dog food and dog supplements because dogs make their own, right? The only animals that don't make their own vitamin C are humans and guinea pigs.
I didn't know this. Okay.
Yeah. The problem is that dogs make about 40 milligrams of vitamin C per day, which is not very much. So that's fine if you're going to be a dog and you're going to run around in the woods and do dog things. But if you are going to get vaccinated, get spayed or neutered, have flea and tick chemicals dumped on you, live in somebody's house where they're spraying chemicals to clean the air and using plugins to emit more pleasant odors, and new furniture and carpet is off-gassing.
And eating a biologically inappropriate diet.
Yes, and the lawn's being treated. Like, no, that's not enough vitamin C for that. Like,
no, it's shot. Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. And so maybe that's part of the reason why dogs are dying of cancer at a great rate. But I even saw there was some invitation that I got recently to class about natural treatment for dogs with cancer. And they said something like, this was like literally yesterday. They were like, 1 in 4 dogs are dying of cancer. Oh no, people, we're up to 62%. We passed 1 in 4
years ago.
Yeah, that was a while back. And so we have a big problem. And so definitely like just the sheer vitamin C deficiency in what we're asking of our dogs to sustain. Yeah, it's a big deal.
All right. So the next question I got was about like one of the oldest living dogs. And apparently they were on a vegan diet. What do you think about a vegan, like rice type of diet for dogs?
I'm impressed that dogs can eat these diets and survive. In my experience, because I've had clients who are vegan and they want their dogs to be vegan too, and the dogs had constant health problems. So I'm not sure how this dog lived to be so old on a vegan diet. When I have people who ask me about vegan diet, for one thing, I'm not the right vet for you because I will not support it. And then I recommend that people look at Dr. Pitcairn's book. So the latest edition of the Complete Guide to Natural Health for Dogs and Cats, that is where he and his wife decided that all dogs and cats should be vegan in order to save the planet, which is one way of looking at things. And because he does have a PhD in immunology and did like a ton of research about this, so if you want your dog to be vegan, follow the recommendations in his book. But that's really like, I cannot help people with that. Certainly that is not the natural diet of the dog. I don't think it's good for them. I think if you look at the stray dogs in different countries, and so there are places in the world where people are subsisting mostly on rice or carbohydrates or something like that. I mean, their stray dogs are pretty miserable. Although that might be true of other parts of the world too.
So you are just like straight up, this makes no sense. Is there, like, what do you think of some fruits or vegetables in their diet? Like, let's say it's mostly meat. Then I think there's some circles who would say, oh no, I'm only feeding meat, or I'm only feeding this. Is there a time and a place for fruits and vegetables?
I think so. So there are people who feed prey model raw, where they believe that dogs only eat other animals. They eat the meat, the bones, the organs, right? So we know it's not just a straight meat diet. But there are people who believe that dogs do not eat anything else and that they don't need anything else in their diet. So I would say dogs are big poop eaters. There's a reason why they're eating deer poop and bunny poop, right? Because those animals are herbivores. They're eating leaves and grasses and twigs and pre-digesting them, and then the dogs will eat them, right? So they themselves cannot digest fruit and veggies. Dogs have, if anything, a minimal amount of amylase. They don't produce amylase in their salivary glands the way that humans do. We also have a hard time digesting veggies and fruit, right? But if we chew our food 100 times before we swallow, then we can mix enough amylase with our fruits and veggies that we can digest some of these carbohydrates. So we are better equipped to deal with those things. Also, our teeth are kind of flat, our jaws can move sideways, and that is just not true of dogs. Their jaws only open and close. They don't have any grinding capability. They're designed to crush bones and swallow them. And yet, dogs eat these things voluntarily, right? Before we put up a fence, our dogs used to raid our vegetable garden every year. They would rip out all the tomatoes and eat all the cucumbers. And we ate one kohlrabi and the dogs ate the rest of them. And as soon as the Brussels sprouts plants sprouted, the dogs ripped them out and ate them entirely. And so dogs do eat these things voluntarily. And we know that wolves eat berries and wolves will eat some different things. But I think the thing that we forget is that we live in this weird land of plenty. We can go to the grocery store any day of the year and buy fresh blueberries. We can buy avocados in the middle of winter. We're not living in real life. So in real life, these things are only available for a super short period of time. So it's not like the wolves go out every morning and are like, hey, do you want blueberries with your whatever? Like, no, they're available for like a week every year. So there was some article that came out on the internet that a lot of my clients sent me, and it was somebody had written something about blueberries and that wolves only eat blueberries when there's nothing else left to eat. And so therefore blueberries are a starvation diet for wolves. And that's why you should never feed them to your dog. If the wolves are depending on blueberries to save them from starvation, like that is a really bad plan. Because again, like in real life, these things have a very specific time limit and they're not always there. So do our dogs eat fruits and veggies voluntarily? Yes. Can they digest them? Not really. So if you feed your dog a baby carrot, yeah, you're going to see pieces of baby carrot come out in their poo. You want them to absorb more of it, you can puree it, you can cook it. That's what we do. So we cook root vegetables a lot so that we can digest them. We also can't digest blueberries unless we crush them or chew them up really well. Nobody can really digest corn. And so, so our dogs are even more carnivore than we are necessarily, and they're just not designed to eat these things. But I think because they do eat them voluntarily, dogs will snuffle around under fruit trees. If we offer them leftovers of Indian food, my dogs are like, okay, sure. And so I think it's okay to have some of this stuff in their diet, but not a lot. I think a lot of times when people are feeding raw, or a meat-based diet, there's a tendency to feed like equal amounts of the meat, bone, and organ and veggies. honestly, a lot of times people do this to cut the cost because veggies are always going to be cheaper than protein. But you're doing your dogs a disservice, and you can very quickly exceed their ability to digest these things.
Mm-hmm.
So some dogs can digest none. Some dogs can digest a little bit. And I just think of it like, I don't even have kids, but I know there's a reason why you don't let your kids eat all the grapes on the way home from the store.
Mm-hmm.
You will exceed their ability to absorb them, and it will backfire on you.
So, in response to like how much, I think that's, I remember when I started feeding raw, and you and I had talked, and I was like, how do you do this? And you're like, well, it's like this, we kind of did that a long time ago. And I was trying to figure it out. There was like nowhere that told me like how much fruits and vegetables am I supposed to put. It was maddening. Like, somebody tell me how much. Well, the reality is if you kind of understand that they really cannot use very much, maybe 6%. Like
the total diet?
Of the total. And so when we made our raw feeding guide, because I know people do like to offer fruits and vegetables, there is something as a nurturer and as feeding them that you're like, I'm giving you plenty. I'm making sure you're taken care of. And so I do understand that it can feel good to feed more fruits and vegetables, but just being aware that it's really not, they don't benefit from a lot. And so don't kill yourself. I used to kill myself.
I remember.
Do you remember that?
You have this pot of fermented
vegetables. I did. I got a food processor just so I could shred all of the veggies, and I made sure it was different every time. Feed the rainbow, right? And I did. I fermented all of them, and which is great. Like, that is so good for them. It is so good for them. And there's kind of that part of me where like now my kids are growing up and they're whatever. And I'm like, I kind of want to get back to fermenting my vegetables. But just don't kill yourself over it. Don't feel like you're going to be, they're going to be deficient if you don't give a lot of fruits and vegetables. So really what I was going to say was in the raw feeding guide, we say no more than 10%. Like if you want to give up to 10%, sure. Like of their overall diet, go ahead. And so, I actually really like fermented foods because that is the best way for them to actually be able to access the nutrients. And so Gussie's Gut, which was developed by Dr. Ian Billinghurst, he's one of my favorites. It's a combination of fermented fruits, vegetables, different things that I just rehydrated on my dog's food. And that really gives them like the biggest pack, punch packed kind of thing. And then every once in a while I'll throw some smashed blueberries or strawberry tops are like one of their favorites, or if I have some cooked sweet potato or, and I'll kind of like, what do I have? Right. I'll throw that in there, but really just to kind of simply answer the question, how much do they need? Not a lot.
Okay. Cause what I kind of do is when I first started raw feeding, I was under the impression, I don't know what model I was following, but it was like, it did not include fruits or vegetables. So I just did straight up, like the
meat, bone, organ.
And then, I started seeing people were adding fruits and vegetables. So I'm like, oh, should I do that? So then I kind of started to, but I just think because my foundation of learning was not that, when I add it, I just kind of, it feels like a little bit weird to me. But again, like I don't have the science backing it like you guys do. But one thing like for me that I noticed is this is like my dog's favorite activity is we go into my garden and I just like let them sniff and eat stuff. So I'm like, well, they like to do that. It's not bad for them, but in my head, maybe instead of thinking, oh, I'm providing just like such a nutritional benefit for them, maybe I can think this is a fun activity. It's
enrichment more than it is.
It's not like,
right.
But so then if I am going to feed a little bit of fruits and vegetables, it should be fermented or crushed up. If I'm like actually doing it to think I'm providing
or cooked.
Yeah. So you want to break it down a little bit somehow. So there's some vegetables that are better if they're lightly steamed. I know broccoli, like the nutrients profile and the polyphenols or something like that, goes through the roof when you slightly cook it. Starchy hard vegetables like sweet potatoes and carrots, those are hard starch, harder vegetables, lightly cooking things like that. If you have, I like getting frozen, like organic frozen fruit from like, you can go to Costco and get a huge bag or whatever. And it's like a blend of all these different fruits. And then I just do it in my blender and add a little water. And then it's broken down to a certain degree
Mhm.
for them. So just something, don't just throw a hole in there. They're probably not going to get a whole lot of use out of it.
Okay.
Mhm.
Is my
Right.
my
But on the
thought.
other hand, but you're not harming them.
No,
And
it's
so
not
for
harming
people
them.
who like to feed their dogs baby carrots
Sure.
or I'm eating veggies and dip,
Mhm.
like I literally did this yesterday. So my dogs had like, honestly, the baby carrots are the ones I like the least. So I just feed them to the dogs with dip.
I ate all my veggies for the day, and your dog like ate most of them.
Right. But I'm not under the illusion that they're actually getting massive nutritional benefit from it.
Mhm.
Does it do anything for them? They enjoy it.
Right.
You know? And
Mhm.
so like, but mostly I would say we typically use our dinner leftovers. So if we have steamed broccoli or something
Mhm.
like that, or anything that my husband has cooked,
Mhm.
except for chili, because he uses way too much chili powder. So that like the dogs will get some of those leftovers, but we don't have leftovers every night.
Mhm.
Doesn't happen all the time. So it's not a regular thing. And the way I tell people about it is, you know, if you wake up one morning, you're like, oh my gosh, I haven't given the dogs any fruits and veggies for like the last 2 months. Okay.
Mhm.
They're not just like
Right.
deficient in this.
Right.
thing.
It's not like they're wasting away from lack of vitamins and minerals because you were busy or forgot and I have clients who, some people never eat at home. Some people don't eat fruits and veggies. And so, like you were saying, then go to the store, buy the bag of organic frozen mixed veggies.
Mhm.
And whenever you remember, thaw out a little handful
Mhm.
for each dog. And
Mhm.
you've done your due diligence.
Mhm.
And it doesn't need to be more complicated than that.
Right.
All right, and this kind of ties into, actually, I didn't really anticipate that it would, but there was a question about grass eating.
Mhm.
I'm just going to take a stab at this and tell me if I'm wrong. Would we say it's the same category? Oh, they're kind of eating some grass, just like in the garden, they kind of eat some of this. Should we be worried that they're eating grass? Should we discourage them eating grass? Like, what are they doing?
Well, if the grass is treated, then your dog should not even be walking on it.
Yes.
Let alone eating it. And I will say, like, when we talk about fruits and veggies, ideally organic,
Mhm.
but like especially hardcore for fruit.
Mhm.
Fruit gets pesticided all to heck. Fruit, traditionally, like, you know, tomatoes are fruit too. Fruit has thin skins. Those pesticides are going to penetrate.
Mhm.
And so you eat whatever the heck you want, but if your fruit is not organic, maybe don't feed it to your dog. So then there's two different types of grass eating. There's the placid, like, look at us, we're a bunch of cows. I'm going to eat this one and I'm going to eat this one. That kind of leisurely, placid grass eating is normal. Dogs will seek out certain grasses at different times of year as a way to, like, it's their intuitive way of managing parasite loads in their intestines that they would have if they were living in the wild. So earlier in the year, they tend to eat like things that are tall and fine, but here, at least in this part of the country, in late August, early September, they eat these broad leaves of grass that are big and have kind of serrated edges. And then the dogs poop them out. And when I look at the poop, I'm like, well, that was obviously indigestible, but it's kind of roto-rootering their intestines. They're getting ready for winter. The difference is in the attitude. So the frantic grass eating, when the dogs, you know, wake up in the middle of the night or even sometimes during the day, like, oh my God, let me out right now. I got to eat some grass. And you see them like snatching at the grass and eating it as fast as possible. Whether or not they barf, that is indigestion. So the first dog that I had as an adult, the dog who got me through vet school, I used to give him rawhide chews, but I would give them to him during the day. And then every time I gave him a rawhide chew, that night at 3:00 in the morning, he would have to run outside and eat grass, eat a lot of grass, eat as much grass as possible. It literally took me years to figure out that I was poisoning him because I didn't know that was indigestion at the time. So now I know.
All right, so I think that was good because my dogs love to eat grass, but it's very leisurely, and I just think good for you guys.
Right.
Whatever. Now that you're saying this, I had a boxer in the past who had that frantic thing. I mean, and it is a very different posture.
Yes.
You can tell something's wrong. So, like, grass eating is probably fine unless just like everything else is like a frantic thing that's concerning. Along with this question about vegetables, okay, I think we're kind of getting there. There's another thing that I notice is people really want to add rice to dogs' food, especially if they're sick. They're like, well, I'm giving them cooked chicken and rice. And you're just like, what are you doing?
And sometimes following their vet's recommendation, because I had one of these yesterday, the lady was giving like 3/4 rice to 1/4 meat. Right?
What's the
doing the chicken and rice because the dog was having indigestion. I don't know
where that came from.
I don't know if at some point in history people ate rice pudding or something when they had indigestion, and that's how. But there is no scenario in which your dog is down at the rice paddies harvesting rice.
There is they have zero nutritional need for carbohydrates at all.
Any carbohydrates.
Yep. I mean, like we can go back to the fruit and veggie conversation. Okay. I think there is some there, but any of these simple carbs, these grains, there's zero reason to put that in there. And actually it hinders digestion. Like it's actually hampers it.
Okay. So it's a filler.
It is.
And very unnecessary.
It's very starchy.
I wonder if the thought, as we're saying this, behind the rice is if you're a kibble feeder and you have a sick dog, I think it feels good to cook them a meal. Like maybe it's like for a person psychologically feels right. Like I'm giving them something extra, and you kind of instinctually know that you don't want to give them kibble. And so maybe there's like a better way instead of rice and chicken, but I think you just know, like you want to provide that, like nurture them in that way.
There is so much, and it's interesting because we all do it. We all do these things. There is so much like emotionally and psychologically that people put onto their dogs, or as it, like, we don't even realize we're doing it, but it actually has nothing to do with the dog. It actually doesn't benefit them at all, but it makes us feel a certain way to do something for them. And then we follow that. And so, that's, I love that you said that, because that's a huge.
Well, okay. So you were just on the radio a couple Sundays ago and I was listening to it, and this lady called in. I don't know if you're going to remember this. And she, like, something was going on with her dog, and she said she's feeding it chicken and rice. And you just point blank asked her, you're like, why are you feeding rice? And she just goes, I don't know. That's just like, she's just, I don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you said the dogs aren't grazing in these rice fields.
Right.
But
but sometimes people are doing it because that's what their vet told them to do.
And why did the vet?
And the other thing too, like a lady I talked to yesterday, her dog was having a lot of chronic intestinal problems. And so when the dog, had diarrhea or barfed up the kibble, she fed it chicken and rice. And like I said, 1/4 chicken to 3/4 rice. And the dog would get better every time. And so then it does kind of reinforce the rice feeding. She did it because that's what her vet told her to do, or she found it online or something like that. But it made her feel better.
Yep.
Obviously, it did the dog good because, hey, it's not kibble.
It's not kibble, and it quit throwing up. So
yeah. And that apparently her dog does have a decent tolerance of digesting carbohydrates, perhaps. So yeah, interesting.
Okay.
Go ahead. Are we going to talk about chicken?
I'm
so ready to talk about.
I can tell by your body language you're ready for this. Okay, so this kind of ties into now this chicken. Okay, so chicken and rice, obviously cooked chicken, whatever. But let's talk about chicken. So I follow a lot of dog chats, and I like to see what people are thinking. And there seems to be a theme. I mean, okay, so I feed chicken, you guys feed chicken. Yeah. But there seems to be this theme, especially when people are new to raw feeding. They'll say, oh, I'm doing this, and maybe something's not working right, or their dog's still itchy. And they're like, but I'm not feeding chicken because I know that a lot of dogs are allergic to chicken. And it's almost like I've done my research since I'm not feeding chicken. And when I'm reading these questions, I'm kind of thinking, what's so heroic about not feeding chicken? And like, when did this in the raw feeding community become a badge of honor that you know not to feed chicken? And I'm watching my dogs eat chicken all the time, and I'm like, I didn't get the memo. So do you want to take this since you are passionate right now about chicken?
Love talking about this. So, okay. The thing about chicken, and it's not just raw feeders, even kibble feeders, I've heard say, but I don't do the chicken recipes because I know not to feed chicken, which is so interesting. So chicken in and of itself is not the bad guy. Chicken's great. We eat chicken. The problem with chicken is it's cheap and it's overused and it's overfed, and most of the chicken that you are going to encounter for your dog, even in the raw food scenario, is factory farmed chicken.
Mm-hmm.
When you have factory farmed chicken, there is, nutritional components to every protein, omega-6s and omega-3s. When you have a huge discrepancy in the amount and in the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3s, you get inflammation. You have problems, okay? So the problem is that when you have factory farm chicken as compared to organic pasture raised chicken, the omega-6s go through the roof because it's not healthy chicken when it's alive, and that's gonna, right? So the omega-6s in the factory farm chicken being way too high, and then also chicken being overfed, that's the problem. Anytime you only feed one protein, if you're a kibble feeder, or 3 proteins as a raw feeder, and it's beef, chicken, and turkey, and that's the one that's the highest in the omega-6 category, and throwing everything else out of whack, because we know omega-3s help fight inflammation. That's why we like fish oil and sardines. And then you're eventually going to see a problem in your dog, in my opinion, in my experience, and the people that I've talked to. I'm like, what are you feeding? There's very few proteins, and the ones that are chicken is in there, and it's not good chicken.
Right.
So chicken's not evil. Chicken is not an allergen. What kind of chicken are you feeding? How often are you feeding it? What else are you feeding? That's the problem.
And
that's the problem.
Yeah, and this is something that's useful to know about kibble is there's something called the turducken factor. And what happens is there have been studies that have reported on this, where they've analyzed a whole bunch of different dry dog foods, and they found that like a certain percentage of them contain proteins that are not listed on the label or on the ingredient list. And there are some cases in which the protein that is on the label is not even in the formula. And let's say that weren't true. Let's say that the ingredient list was telling the truth about what's in the food. You still have to read through all the ingredients. Even if it says on the label, lamb and oatmeal, start reading through the ingredients, and sometimes there's chicken in there.
Chicken byproduct.
Or even though they'll just say chicken.
It'll just
but
say
because
chicken.
It's not the main protein, doesn't make it onto the packaging. So that's also kind of an issue. And it is a pain in the butt when you get to some of these canned foods in little cans with teeny tiny microscopic font, and you have to read through the ingredient list.
So you're saying even if you're trying to avoid chicken, you might still be
correct.
You might still be getting
correct.
it.
You can't trust the kibble that says, duck and lentils does not also have chicken in it. You have to read through your ingredients. The other thing that I find is that when people have itchy dogs or dogs with a history of seizures or some sort of inflammation, and they say, well, I know not to feed chicken because chicken is hot. It's a hot protein. And my dog needs cooling proteins. And my answer is always A, I know very little about Chinese medicine. And B, not every itchy dog or not every dog with a seizure is going to be a hot dog or excess yang. Like, I know enough about Chinese medicine to know that I cannot tell the difference between excess yang and yin deficiency, which might require a whole different diet. And so just assuming that every itchy dog on the planet, it has excess yang and therefore needs to be on cooling proteins, I personally do not recommend going down that road because I want to see variety in the diet. I've had people come in and they've been feeding turkey for 3 years because the dog is itchy and therefore they know they have to feed a cooling protein. But one cooling protein is not going to save your dog. And so when I have people come in and they're feeding a wide variety of proteins, I'm talking between 5 and 10 different proteins, and they're changing their proteins, whether it's every meal, every day, or every 2 or 3 days, but then they're moving on to the next protein. And what this also means is not feeding chicken, turkey, chicken, duck, chicken, pork.
Right.
Right? You got to watch it with that. So if they're truly rotating between 5 to 10 different proteins, then food is not the problem.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? And if they're getting their food from a good source and it's, it doesn't have things in it that it shouldn't have.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there's a ton of different raw foods out there because this is, this business, I think, is, climbing up towards what the kibble people are doing. I mean, raw food is very popular.
Right.
So there's a lot of people making stuff out there that is called raw that, that's a whole nother discussion
debatable.
in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
But if people are really, they're feeding good foods and they have a wide variety of proteins and they're not repeating them too frequently, then the food is probably not the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Not every itchy dog is itchy because of what it's going into its mouth, even though food is often a way to repair these itchy dogs.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of other reasons why the immune system might be showing you this is my preferred method of detoxification.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right. So there's a couple things I'm hearing, and I just kind of want to summarize this a little bit. And it seems like a lot of the answer to all this is feeding a variety. No matter what we're talking about, it's rotate your food, feed a variety, rotate your food.
Mm-hmm.
Something like these cooling and hot proteins, I've kind of seen a lot of that lately. And maybe there's a time and place for it. I don't know. But one thing that I've seen lately is in the summer, you do this rotation of the cooling proteins,
really?
But then in the winter, you should add these warming proteins. And I just think maybe, but then I also think if you're just starting to raw feed and now you're oh no, now it's summer and then I have to do this, that would be very overwhelming. Yeah. So maybe don't get too caught up in that unless you're zeroing in on a specific issue and you maybe have come to the conclusion that is what I need to do. Mm-hmm. That's not just a broad thing, everybody should be on board with this. So I just kind of wanted to clear that up.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. The other thing, so when I heard you saying, you should watch your chicken should be organic and all this stuff.
Yeah.
I think that's ideal. Mm-hmm. But however, is that realistic? Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't think it maybe necessarily is, but if we're rotating it enough, the omega-6 in a not pasture-raised organic chicken being high over a broad diet wouldn't maybe impact it as much as if the chicken was every other day or every day. Mm-hmm. Another question I had, so if the omega-6 is high in not as good of chicken, would it be smart or irrelevant to add more omega-3s that day? So
Absolutely.
Maybe you put a sardine in with your mediocre chicken.
Yep.
Does that balance?
That was actually, I was going to say that, but I was well, we don't need to talk about to that degree, but that's what I would say. Get your variety, get away from so much chicken. If you can't do the expensive quality chicken, a lot of people can't, you really just want to add as much omega-3 in there to try and take the edge off of that omega-6 being too high as you possibly can. And so maybe on those days, I would feed a couple of whole sardines. I want to push as much omega-3s in there as possible when I do feed something like a poultry, like chicken. I don't think turkey's quite as bad. But if I feed any kind of poultry or even pork, to me, pork is quite, some people feed it, some people don't like to feed it. To me, that strikes me as another one that would be higher in omega-6s. And so just anytime it's just in my head. If I'm feeding pork or poultry, I add omega-3s. Okay. That's just kind of how I've done it.
Okay, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now if we're kind of on this topic of kind of foods to avoid, foods to rotate, I've heard there was some kind of debate about liver. And I've heard you say, oh my gosh, it's this multivitamin powerhouse liver. Mm-hmm. And then I've heard some people saying, liver is this detoxer, so it's holding toxins.
Because it filters
them. And so then you shouldn't feed liver. And then, so I kind of looked into that, and then it was some dogs shouldn't eat liver. Should dogs eat liver? If they shouldn't, who shouldn't eat liver? And is liver full of toxins? So liver filters, it does not store. It does not store toxins. I think that is a huge misunderstanding. I've heard it a lot myself.
And because I know how much nutritional benefit is in liver, it just makes me so sad. I'm like, your dog is missing out on so many vitamins and minerals because you're not feeding liver. And then especially if you can do grass-fed beef liver, like the nutrients are off the charts. So it is nature's multivitamin. There is so much in liver, not just in beef, but just in general, and they get different things from different animals, right? And so if you're not feeding liver, it's like not giving them the best multivitamin you could give them, in my understanding.
All right, and then I've heard then too, okay, if you're not going to do liver, then do like these fruits and veggies to make up for it. But based on our previous conversation, that maybe for people that would make up for a deficiency,
you would need to use a lot
in dogs.
You would need to use a lot.
Right, but a lot isn't going to help.
And that's not going to help.
Right, because they're limited by their ability to absorb.
Yep.
And so basically, our dogs are designed to get their vitamins and mineral needs met from eating the organs of their prey.
Right.
So for dogs who don't like liver, or their owners have a hard time getting them to eat it, or they can't find a good source of liver, there are plenty of grass-fed, beautifully blended organ supplements on the market for humans.
Mm-hmm.
And I use those quite a bit, especially when people are starting to feed raw and the whole thing is already overwhelming.
Right.
There were a couple of classes. So Raw Bistro, one of our local pet food companies here, Raw Pet Food Company, there were a couple of years in a row where they brought in Steve Brown. That's the guy who invented Steve's Real Food. He's not involved in it now because he sold the company years ago. They brought in him and Karen Becker to teach classes about formulating raw diets. Steve Brown loves USDA spreadsheets, which are noxious and sleep-inducing to people like me.
I can't do them.
Yeah. And so basically, like, one class that they taught was how to formulate the perfect chicken diet. And then the next class was how to formulate the perfect beef diet. And it was exactly what you're saying. Like, every different protein has a different nutrient profile, different levels of fatty acids. And so there was a lot of, when you're feeding chicken, you have to do this, but not that. Don't add this when you're feeding chicken, but you must add this. And then when you're feeding beef, you don't want to add this, but you must add this. And I sat there the whole time thinking, this is all very interesting. I'm just going to feed my dog something different every day.
Yeah.
And then I don't have to worry about this because I don't have time to become a USDA spreadsheet.
Right.
I would literally have to have like each protein like on my fridge, and then you check every day like, oh wait, I'm feeding bison. Okay, wait, what do I have?
Right.
I can't do that. I cannot do that.
It's just gotten so overly complicated.
Rotating it still, again,
Right.
Now we're coming to that,
Yes.
the answer, because at some point through the week or the month,
Yeah.
you are rotating through it, just might not be in the dish
Exactly.
that day.
Exactly.
Yep.
That's why we rotate our supplements as well.
Yep.
And then I think too, like, when you're getting started, don't worry about rotation. Like, when you're just getting started, for me, the biggest stumbling block was thawing the food. My dogs ate a lot of eggs for the time that it took me to remember to thaw food. Like, I really had to train myself. And so, like, when you get started raw feeding, you have to figure out, like, what is my stumbling block? I mean, if you're perfect and you have no stumbling blocks, that's great. But, like, you start with one protein that is not going to make you crazy and train yourself. Thaw, serve. Because what you want to look for initially is, my dog likes the food. My dog is eating the food. My dog is digesting the food. He's not vomiting. He's not having a lot of diarrhea. Everything seems to be going okay. When I was starting out, if I had to think about supplements or anything, or like fruits and veggies, my brain would have exploded. And so literally I was like, okay, thaw, serve, thaw, serve, or maybe thaw, serve, whatever. But really, that was all I could handle. At that time, I was working 10-hour days. I had 7 dogs. It was a little bit insane. And then I did a transition from kibble to raw food, and I took a long time. I took like 6 months, which was totally unnecessary. And ever since those initial 7 dogs 20 years ago, I've never done a transition with any of my dogs since then. Because as you go along, you gain confidence. As you go along and you're like, oh, my dog isn't dying.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my dog actually seems to feel better.
Mm-hmm.
It encourages you. It gives you courage.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're like, okay, oh, now what was I supposed to do next?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm going to feed a different protein.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And you get excited because you are doing something good for your dog, and your
Mm-hmm.
dogs love the food.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think many people, and we actually encourage this, even, if you're brand new to raw feeding, you can certainly do like what we lay out in our guide where it is, it's completely raw. You're rotating different foods in. I've had people jump in and do that and they do great. A lot of people, it's too much, too fast. And so there is nothing wrong with going to your local high-end pet food store and going through their freezers and picking a raw food and starting there, because a lot of those, even though they're not maybe as bioavailable, because there is some processing there as some of these other truly raw food, which is where we want you to end up. It's got all the stuff in there, and it's literally like, I just have to thaw these amount of patties and feed them to my dog. If that's where you start, that's where you start. Start with anything. If you can do 2 proteins, like grab 2 proteins, but it's like, people are so worried about screwing it up. You're not going to be perfect. You're not going to have it all figured out. It took us years and, a canine nutrition certification course to get to where we are with our understanding and how we feed. And it took a long time. So if you have to start, you just start. Go get something, if you get something from a pet food store that's commercially made in a freezer, it's gone through a sanitization process. And so you don't have, if you're worried about bacteria and stuff, which that will subside as you get into it, then that's where you start. But just know that the closer you can get to fresh, completely raw food and a wide variety of it, like that, as long as you're moving closer to that, that's the goal.
Yeah, I think that like when we talk a lot about just like the basics, because a lot of people are new to this and just starting, I think that's good. But then I think we also want to talk about more advanced stuff, because we want you to know, don't stay there. Recognize that you're in the beginning stages, and that's fine.
Yep.
But I think, right, like if when I was starting, if I had to worry about supplements or feeding omega-3s with omega-6s, I would just quit, and I'd be like, I don't even want a dog. I'm going to get a hamster, right? Like this is too much. But just recognize, once you get like a flow down, maybe add something more.
Yep.
And that's going to maybe kind of tie into this next thing. Okay, so I've been doing this for 15 years. I just started adding whole prey. Like if you follow my Instagram, like I feed heads, and I don't know why, I just like love
that you do it. Yeah.
And then I've gotten comfortable with that. But the first time I watched him eat a head with a beak on it, I was like, is this going to just completely slice their whole esophagus, right? Like you think about these things, and then I watch him do it. I'm like, oh no, now I like it. And then another thing was this fasting concept. I knew about it for 3 years, and I've kind of just started doing it a couple of weeks ago. So I kind of want to talk about, well, first, a more common question would be, how often should we be feeding? Like each day. And then maybe it can lead into this fasting conversation for people who maybe are ready for it, which it took me 15 years. Can we talk about, okay, so let's talk about how often should we be feeding our dogs in general?
Adults, dogs a year or older is kind of the benchmark, should be eating once a day. As of right now, there's starting to be new things coming out that make it, but I don't want to scare people. So once a day, they should not eat more than that. That allows their body, it's kind of intermittent fasting for dogs, and it allows their body to completely cycle through, give a little bit of a rest to the digestive system before you put more food back into them. So once a day for adults. If it's a puppy, we know puppies, when they're really little, you're feeding 3 to 4 times a day. We never fed 4 times a day. We did 3 times a day when they were really little, and then they would get to nurse off of mom whenever they wanted. When they go home, they're eating 3 times a day, but that really only lasts till they're maybe 3 months old, and then they're not hungry. And so then you go to twice a day. So really puppies, if they're being raw fed, should be eating twice a day. up to a year. But a lot of times our puppies will self-regulate. And so they would hit 9 months old and they're like, I don't want my breakfast. I'm not hungry. If that happens consistently enough, they're ready to go to once a day. There's no hard and fast, it depends on the breed, depends on the dog, depends on the size. Like it can vary. So I would say, puppies, for the most part, it's twice a day for the first year, but there's flex in that. And then when they're an adult, it should be once a day.
Yep.
I don't mind if people feed twice a day because I know a lot of people are acclimated to that. The other thing too is that people are not good at resisting the begging that can happen. If you decide, okay, I'm only going to feed the dog once a day, just, gird your loins and be prepared. Your dog is going to be expecting breakfast. Currently, I feed my dogs once a day, but we've fed them twice a day for many years. But when you're feeding twice a day, you want your meals to be as far apart as possible. And so your 2 meals should not be breakfast and lunch.
No.
Or lunch and dinner. Those 2 meals are going to be too close together. So basically, for us as humans, we have teeny tiny little stomachs that empty quickly. So our stomachs don't hold a lot of food, but 2 to 4 hours later, the food has moved on into our small intestine. And guess what? We're hungry again. Dogs are not like that, right? For dogs, digestion happens mostly in the stomach. So the food stays in the stomach for 8 or 10 hours and before it finally moves on, because they don't have as much small intestine as we do. And so if you feed the dog breakfast and then 4 or 5 hours later, you're feeding lunch or you're feeding the dog's second meal of the day, you're putting fresh food that is going to land on top of food that is partially fermented already. You're going to slow the digestive process. You're going to give your dog indigestion, essentially. So you're kind of messing them up by doing that. So now I will say, if somebody in my house gets up and goes into the kitchen to get a snack, or when we're done with dinner and we're giving the dog some leftovers, is that really an extra meal? If you're training your dog, like last night we were at training class, our dogs had already been fed. Did they get treats during training?
Of course they
Sure.
Yeah.
And so, so there are all sorts of small ways in which we kind of break this big rule, but their main meal, or if it's going to be 2 meals a day, the 2 meals should be as far apart as possible. And then the main meal, just, whenever you decide that it's going to be.
So the idea is to give their digestion a rest, or let them cycle through the 1 meal before you pile another meal on top.
Yeah. So I'm totally impressed that you've started fasting your dogs. I typically only fast my dogs. We talked about in one of our videos how I fed Viva when I should have fasted her after she helped herself to 5 more pounds of food. Like a dummy, I fed her the next day, whatever. Okay.
You would have told me not to.
100%.
You're emotionally tied to your dog.
I was like, she seems fine.
She was so cute.
She was not fine. Then I had to fast her for 2 days after that. But I will fast my dogs. Like, I gauge their enthusiasm. If I am holding out a raw chicken thigh and you are not ripping it out of my hand, you're not hungry enough to be fed. And so I look at that very carefully, because sometimes people have said to me, well, how long do you give your dog to eat? Like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, a second and a half. This is a split-second decision. If I put down that dish and your face is not in it, I'm picking it up. And it will just go back in the fridge, and you can look at it again tomorrow when you get fed again.
Oh, so if they're not like super into it, you're not going to try 2 hours later.
No, gosh, no.
You're done for the day.
Oh, 100%. And so I think too, like when I get emails from people, they're like, my dog vomited, or my dog's having diarrhea, or my dog, doesn't seem to feel well, or is burpy or something like that. If you're thinking to yourself, should I feed the dog? The correct answer is always no.
Okay, and this is me. And this actually just happened with us. I don't know if you'll even remember this. Something was going on with my dog, and you're like, don't feed her. And then it seemed like she was maybe hungry kind of a few hours later, and I fed her, and I told you that, and you're like, why did you do that? And I'll tell you why. Because my emotions, I needed so badly to think things were normal, to take that feeling away from me that was like things aren't normal. And so feeding and watching my dog eat means It's all clear. We're in the clear.
Yes. The sun will come out again. She's going to live.
She's going to live.
Yeah.
I'm going to go grocery shopping, go on with my day without this pit in my stomach. Mm-hmm. And so I'm feeding her because I need things to be normal.
That's why I fed Viva the day after she helped herself to
right, so it's human.
5 pounds more raw food after she had been fed 2 pounds.
Right, so it's very emotionally driven,
100%.
Not factually driven.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to recognize that. And then after, like you said, why did you do that? I had read an article from Dogs Naturally about fasting. And then it was like such a good article. I wonder if we could link it. But it was like, oh, that's why she told me to fast. It's not because, not in a sick case, because she needs to like just fully digest her food. It's because like her body is going to gather the junk that it wouldn't have time to gather if it was doing food. Give it a break so it can kind of maybe do some other stuff. Like I'm thinking of it like, okay, I drive kids around in my car all the time and I kind of pick up after them, keep it a little bit clean as the day goes on. But if I had a specific day of the week where I did a detailing, I would have time to do that because I'm not just driving. They're like leaving me alone.
That's a great analogy.
So it's like, so in my thought of fasting, it's like if one day a week, there's just like not food in their stomach, not kids in the car, they can detail themselves. Does that?
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
So, okay.
Yeah, it's very inspiring.
Well, sorry to keep talking about this, but so for the day that they're fasting, I've been doing goat milk because I feel like better about that. But then I asked you guys, and I'm like, is that fasting? And you're like, it's okay. It's like better than having them digest like these giant chunks
raw
of
meals.
Food.
Yeah.
But essentially, if we're going to truly.
Yeah, but I mean, but that's fine. Like you're using it as a stepping stone to ease yourself into true fasting. So, let's just let go of the judgment a little bit.
Okay, but essentially, like the goal would be, or if they're sick or whatever, like I need stop feeling so bad about not feeding for them at times, and let their body like catch up with itself.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and like we reference wolves a lot, right? Like if you look at the wolf. And so, I mean, when you think about a wolf in the wild and how they naturally live, they don't eat every day. There are times, I mean, especially, when it's in the winter or whatever, they can go a week without eating. Like, and I use that when I talk to people and they're like, what should I do? And I'm like, you're going to fast them. And then I tell them, until whatever. And then I can hear on the other end of if you feel terrible. And I'm like, wolves can go like 10 days, guys. Like seriously, they're going to
a month.
Right. It's really going to be okay. And you need to think about that. You're doing it for their health. You're not depriving them. You're giving them the ability to have a much more robust system and heal themselves and put energy, not to digestion, but to other parts of their body that need it.
Okay.
Right. Because even feeding our dogs once a day, we're not feeding them as nature intended.
We're not. It's very regimented, and that's not how it happens in the wild at all.
So for one thing, we don't have to feed our dogs at the same time of day every day.
No.
You can feed your dog whenever willy-nilly because that's how nature works. Nature doesn't say, oh my gosh, 5 p.m., here's a bunny. And so so that's unrealistic. But then food every day is also unrealistic in general. But then it kind of depends on what kind of activities we want to do with our dogs, what our expectations are from them. So it would be ideal to feed our dogs like wolves or like lions. Here, eat as much food as you want, and I'll feed you again in a week and a half.
Right.
But what happens then is that they do stuff themselves. And did I tell you about this video I saw on the internet? It was lions after a hunt.
Oh,
there are these 2 lions. They're literally lying on their sides. Their bellies are like this. And one of them's lying there going,
like actually making noise.
And we all know that feeling.
But the problem is that I want my dog to go for a walk with me once or twice a day. I want to take her to training classes where I want her to want to eat the treats. I'm going to take her to the park so she can run around and chase the ball. And if you feed your dog like a lion, they're not going to want to do a whole lot for 3 or 4 days.
There's that.
And so that's where we kind of modify how we feed our dogs because we want them to do these activities with us, which is fine. Like that is literally not the end of the world. I think the future of raw feeding is going to be moving from once a day to every other day, because again, it's going to get closer to that natural eat less often, eat more at one time. So maybe you'll be after you conquer fasting.
First, I have to like get off of goat milk on the fasting day, but I'm not quite ready for that. Okay, so I think we kind of like talked that through. Then I think we'll kind of end it with this final question. And I think this is a really good one. Is there ever a time that raw feeding is not recommended? Like if a dog has a certain disease or a certain age or is there something where you'd be like, I don't recommend raw for this specific situation?
That's a great question.
Probably not.
You're
Probably not, because I think that dogs should always be able to eat their natural diet. Now, I definitely, I read medical records all the time from other veterinarians. I've attended a lot of lectures given by veterinarians about dog nutrition and dog feeding. And I hear some things like, well, humans have evolved and are completely able to tolerate grains, and our dogs have evolved right along with us, and they can tolerate grains. And as we know, dogs have evolved and can no longer tolerate their ancestral diet, which implies that dog food was invented longer than 5 minutes ago. Like in the grand scheme of evolution, dog food was invented 5 seconds ago, perhaps. This is a super recent invention. Dog food was first developed in the late 1800s when somebody invented dog biscuits, which were made of garbage from the human food industry, which dog food still is technically. But in general, feeding your dog kibble instead of table scraps was not really popular until the 1960s. And I was alive in the 1960s. So evolution has not happened since then. Evolution happens on a grand scale. So at this point, dogs are still wolves. They are the domesticated wolf, and their ancestral diet is still what they should be fed.
Thank you so much for joining us. Our goal is always to encourage others to seek out the holistic approach by way of education and empowerment. You can check out our online resources at wellspringhaa.com. You can follow us on our YouTube channel, Wellspring Holistic Animal Academy, and you can also find us on Instagram at wellspring_HAA. We hope that this has been helpful and that you continue with us on your journey to holistic health for your pets. As always, we're here to be unapologetically all natural.